Hi, everyone. So a little bit of a context, how we ended up here and why we are here. My name is Andjelic. I was introduced. I'm former Chief Brand Officer of Rebecca Minkoff, and I work as executive consultant with fashion, luxury, and lifestyle brands. And I was greatly honored to be asked to speak here with Nancy, executive at Vice, and like a female executive. So it's a special honor to have female on female action. So I'll start with, well, not in that way, guys. Okay.
Dirty minds, you.
Exactly. So let's start from this being a topic of trust. I sort of want to have a different layers how you're going to explore that in relation to Vice. So my first question is, Vice was started by Canadian countercultural Gen X. Yeah. It became known as a millennial publication, and now we have Generation Z with a completely different set of values. And I say completely different because, as I heard yesterday, you're not blacklisting any words anymore, which sounds like a move in a Gen Z direction in terms of gender fluidity, inclusivity, and so on.
Yeah. So just to give some context to what happened yesterday, we had our NewFront yesterday, and I'm just about to have my 1-year anniversary at Vice. And one of the things that on day one, I sent out here's how we're going to work, together, because I have a very, very young culture at Vice. And one of the things that we've been working on is communicating. And so one of the things I communicated was the door was open. Let me know what's going on. And in my first week, I got an email from a young gentleman in our brand safety department explaining to me that every day he gets a list of words from either agencies or clients, words that he has to tag to content as unsafe. And some of these words are gay and bisexual, and he's gay. And so this is content that no longer can have advertisement attached to it. So I marched downstairs and I wanted to learn, because I don't come from the digital space, sort of how this works and how the work stream works. And so yesterday we announced, we chose 30 words, 25 to 30 words, which through a couple of months of figuring out what was going on, that words that we receive from either advertisers or clients that are deemed not brand safe, that we will no longer accept. So if a client or an advertising agency or says this word is not safe, then you just can't advertise on Vice. So, thank you. And then we had people identify with those words, and everybody in the room could identify with those words. So in the spirit of trust, there's just a common sense to some of this. And we want to trust the people that we work with the way that I want to trust my employees to raise their hand and say, hey, by the way, three floors down, there's a problem that you should know about. And so I'm thankful that employee reached out to me, and I'm thankful the response for in the room today, and hopefully that we can get a real conversation started about how to do this together, because we need to.
Right, and he's probably thankful that he reached out to you, because that led to real change. Which leads me to my next question, which is more like alignment of internal culture. Oops, it's okay.
I got it.
Thank you. It's, thank you. Alignment, that internal culture with external one, because Vice managed to become so successful because it was sort of the same the same group of people you advertised to, or were the same group of people who were covering stories. And there was sort of fluidity and creativity and lack of structure that allowed that creativity to flourish, that environment to flourish. Yes. But at the same time, what made Vice unique and strong was also its undoing in a certain way, the same lack of structure and fluidity and that, So
this is the tightrope that I walk every day.
Yeah.
We called it choose your own adventure. And it really works well in some respects when you want to foster innovation and creativity and experimentation. Right. But the irony with creatives, and that's the label that I like to self-identify with as a creative. Somehow along the way, I got the CEO label slapped onto me, and that she understands business. There are days where I'm not so sure I want to identify with that label. But because I understood how to read a P&L somewhere along the way, but the creatives, ironically, actually like a box and like to have a project that is really clearly identified, like solve this. And we stopped at Vice being clear about what our strategy was and what we were doing. And it was the too much choose your own adventure that people were doing. The breadth and depth of what people were doing created a lot of sprawl. And then that's actually not great for the consumer either.
Right.
Because of the clarity of what's going on. And we had, at the end of the day, I think when I got there, almost 14 verticals. And so what we announced yesterday also was we were collapsing everything down to Vice.
Right, right.
And so doesn't mean that a lot of categories aren't going to be covered under Vice Digital. But the only brands other than Vice that will be continue to be supported are Noisy Munchies. I'm going to forget one. News, Vice News,
Right.
and then ID and Garage as the fashion luxury brands as well.
Right. This is a little bit off of the script, but I would like to see how do you see in like 5 years, sort of like what is that kind of a culture that you want to have? Because I mean, I have a boring question, like you're almost CMOs, as a former CMO, you're CMO's version of millennial media, you know, that's not a fun question. The fun question for me, what you just said is like walking the tightrope is basically how do you see that, like the scenario of that in 5 years?
Well, we've sold Vice for billions and billions of dollars, and I'm on a beach is really how I say it.
Let's go, done.
Check that box. No. You know, really one of the things that excites me every day is it does feel like a beginning, and that, you know, that we do keep some of the choose your own adventure. That what I think the reason why Vice has been so successful at following the XYZ, when you think about the generations, is that we're not afraid and we're very aware of when you go on, you have to be on every platform. Like that's just in our DNA. That's never been a question. And then when you're on every platform, you have to really understand how that platform and how that technology is being used. And so when, you know, we started experimenting with Snap and it was working and we were growing and it became exponential, we have a Snap group now, and like that team is there and they understand what's happening there, and they're really dedicated to that audience. And so, you know, ironically, and this has been reported about in the press, when you look at Vice, digital's it's a little bit less than 25% of our total business and revenue. And less than 50% of our business and revenue and traffic is inside the US. So I spend most of my time on the road outside of the US and most of my time on television, the film studio, and the agency business. So the agency business is really relevant to this room. But we had the biggest sale with Amazon at Sundance this year. Fire Festival on Netflix was us this year, and so that business is super important to
Charlottesville,
us. Charlottesville the news division is really important.
Yeah.
So we're spending a lot of time thinking about what is Vice's voice in news going to be for the 2020 election. How are we going to differ? We don't want to. We're obviously not on the far right or on the left. We're not pundits at a desk, and we have an important role to play with young people and first-time voters. And so what is that going to be? And that's a huge responsibility as a media company. And so, people put the digital label on us, but it's actually a really small part of our business. And so my job is to do a much better job explaining what Vice is and what Vice does.
Right.
So 5 years from now, I hope you can all parrot that back to me, what we do.
Right. And then since the conference theme is trust, I'm guessing that you also want a sort of cumulative advantage, walking the walk internally and externally.
Yeah, I mean, our audience trusts us. That's not, our trust scores with audiences are off the charts, and they're really off the charts versus other media. So that's the thing. I walk around with that piece of paper and covet, and wave it in front of everyone and say, do you realize what we have here? Because when you look at us versus everybody else, our trust scores for news are at 90%, and our trust score for the overall brand are, I think, 84, 85%. And versus other brands, it's very, very, very high, especially in news. And corporate America is super low, as everybody knows.
That's what I mean, especially in the current context,
Yeah.
where the trust is very low, especially with
Yeah.
the younger
And that's
audience.
versus like 18 to 34-year-olds who don't trust
Anything.
anything.
Their own mothers.
Yeah, and I have, a specimen around that age in my house. Mom.
I think that we're out of time. So, but if you have any last moment, like saying hello from the beach after
Yes.
the vice says, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Thank you, guys.